Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation and Housing convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were given to the media on July 29th and then on August 1st, and today is August 6th, and the time is now 9 o'clock. The committee will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following Bill 186 COR, as introduced by myself, an act making appropriation for the operation of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2020, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions. Joining me for this public hearing is Senator Therese Chalayi, and I know I'll be joined shortly by Senator Will Castro. General rules for public hearing. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order of the sign-up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony may be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony, as may be desired by the members of the panel. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for the proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony or may be asked to leave or be escorted, removed from the room. Fair warning, if there's not proper form and decorum, you will be escorted out. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name for the record. We will now begin hearing testimonies on Bill 186-35. We will start with asking Madam Catherine Merriman, Chief Justice, and your staff. And then that will be followed by the BBMR and DOA representative, if you could come before the panel, so right after the Chief Justice. And we also have listed here, we have former Speaker Wanpet. Ma'am, just have a seat, because you'll be first. Where's former Speaker, Senator Wanpet? I know you signed up, you're here, right? Ma'am, just... Also joining me this morning is Senator Luis Muñoz. Ma'am, you may begin, Your Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I have submitted a written letter dated today regarding this measure. And I would like to clarify that even though I speak in broader terms, my testimony only refers to the appropriations and provisions that apply to the judicial branch. I'm not commenting on the legislative or executive branches. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the members of the 35th Guam Legislature for allowing the courts this rare opportunity to discuss again the upcoming fiscal year budget, most especially how it impacts the 400 employees of the Judiciary of Guam and the tens of thousands of island residents whom we serve on an annual basis. Your third co-equal branch of the government of Guam supports the revised measure. The judiciary will be able to squeak by during the next fiscal year. I was thinking about that sentence this morning, and I would like to add, we're most grateful that you have allowed us to maintain the people and personnel that we have With this budget, we do not anticipate reducing hours or laying off employees. When I came before you last year, it was a different story. We were facing layoffs and cutbacks. So for that, I want to say thank you. As you are aware, the judiciary has faced reduced allotments and budgets over the past 2 fiscal years. I am here to testify that we have been good stewards of the funding given us. Mr. Chairman, we have been able to persevere in meeting our mandates. Although the appropriation levels for fiscal year 2020 set forth in Bill 18635 may be above last year's, there will still have to be necessary reductions in operations in order for the judiciary to make ends meet. Personnel costs continue to increase significantly. These expenses will increase through the restoration of increments and higher benefit costs, such as health insurance. The judiciary will live within its means and have a transparent record of so doing. Any unexpected circumstances, such as a natural disaster or any operational changes that may impact our branch as a result of our interaction with the executive branch in 2020, will not be without further adverse consequences. If the budget is passed as presented, you can expect the following actions from the judiciary effective October 1st to mitigate any problems that may arise over the next 12 months. We will continue to close our intake windows at probation services and the clerk's offices at 4 p.m. We will continue to freeze meritorious bonuses. I have directed the administrator of the courts not to lease an employee parking lot and to terminate the electronic monitoring contract when the initial funding runs out. We will fund leases for our judicial storage facility, the Northern Court Satellite, Judicial Education Center, and the new probations building through local funds. We will again terminate and reduce contract costs even at the cost of efficiency. We will implement pay increments as mandated, but seek legislative support in this measure by including the following language. The judicial branch shall pay employees entitled to increments in fiscal year 2019, prospectively beginning in the first pay period of fiscal year 2020 as follows. An employee who had an anniversary date during fiscal year 2019 and received an evaluation recommending an increase shall be entitled to the increment beginning in the first pay period of fiscal year 2020. The employee's anniversary date for purposes of evaluation and determination of eligibility for an increment shall not change. The judiciary shall implement payment of increments as funds become available. The health insurance contract will have to be streamlined. The health insurance contract will have streamlined benefits to give access to basic medical and wellness services across the island and abroad to employees and their families. Except for critical positions, the judiciary will freeze hiring in the first quarter of fiscal year 2020, and purchases of equipment requested for court security will be deferred until 2021. As you know, the government's fiscal situation continues to hamper court operations. Continued reductions have limited expansion of our treatment courts, postponed necessary modernization of our technology, and delayed necessary replacement and repair of capital assets. We cannot take steps to implement other actions to resolving disputes in a shorter period of time such as adding a criminal case manager or preventing elder abuse by auditing guardianships. As we must do, we share the consequences of the government's limited resources. We look forward to a time when we can do more to serve this island. In the meantime, we are grateful for restoration of some of our funding. The budget is our key in serving our people, and we ask for your continued support of this measure. My staff is here. If you have any questions for me or my staff, we'd be glad to answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chief Justice. We'll have now, I'm not going to be asking any questions. Does any of the panel, I'm also joined up here with my colleagues, Senator Jim Moylan and Senator Kelly Marsh, but I'm not going, I have no questions to ask. I just want to let everybody understand that whatever is said today, it'll be presented to all my colleagues in session. So as you make proposals, it'll be heard, recorded. Then when we go to the floor, that's when a lot of the hard decisions will be made. So and I understand how the court system, an equal member of the government, we made every effort to try to find funds for everyone. So increments are restored, reclassification for teachers are done, try to meet everyone's needs. But there's, like the Chief Justice brought, there's only so much money we can spread across. But during session is when there's going to be the identification of who can get it the most. There's going to need 8 senators to vote on the budget, and that will prevail. And please be monitoring the TV on that day on session. Then you'll get to see exactly how the budget is going to revolve. I'm hoping as is, if it's true that the government of Guam will have a $20 million surplus, I would hope that the court will get a portion of that so they can bring things up to speed. And so will the public health, and so will DOE. When I refer to DOE, I'm referring to education in general, UOG, GCC, charter schools, and DOE, because that comprises of the education. Okay, court is one group that needs money. I know that. There's no doubt about that. We can only give so much, okay? So we'll now proceed to, what do we have next? Well, we have you, so we'll go ahead and proceed with you. If you want to speak, sir. You're good?
He's the
part of your
deputy
staff.
administrator of the court.
Okay. So we'll go to, before I get to BBMR and DOA, I'm going to go to Rosie. Ms. Tenetongo, former superintendent, board member, now with the Guahan Academy. Ma'am.
Just to be, we don't want to be rude, but are we excused now?
Unless any of the senators, my colleagues, want to ask a question. Ma'am, Senator Terline.
Thank you, Chief Justice, for being here this morning and for your testimony, and I appreciate your concerns here. Can you just specify when you say we will again terminate and reduce contract costs, even at the cost of efficiency? This is in addition to the contract modifications you've already outlined.
Yes.
Can you give an example of what that might entail?
Well, for example, when the photocopying machines come up, we'll have to eliminate things like that. We don't have any major cuts. We're re-examining our phone system right now.
I see.
We may have to change the services we get for the phones.
All right.
So, an employee may have to walk to a copying machine out of their office and things like that.
I see. I appreciate your efforts. It says the leases for the storage facility, education center, the Northern Court Satellite, new probation building. It says we will fund leases to local funds. Does that mean from local funds? I know you had told us earlier from local funds. So that's
from
just
the general fund appropriation.
This is consistent with your original request.
Yes.
And finally, just the health insurance contract that you say will have streamlined benefits, you've already completed your health insurance negotiations?
Almost. I believe there's one more session
I
tomorrow.
see. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Does any of my colleagues have any question of the Chief Justice? No, ma'am, there's nothing. You're excused. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And committee members.
Rosie.
Okay, thank you, Chairman San Agustin. Good morning, Senator Castro, Senator Taitano, Senator Moylan, Senator Terlaje, Senator Muña, and Senator Perez. My name is Rosie R. Tainatongo, and I am the Vice Chairwoman of the Board of Trustees of Guahan Academy Charter School. Sorry, my voice. Honorable Chairman, Senator San Agustin, and esteemed members of this committee, I would like to recognize the members of the board, Chairwoman Faye Valencia Ovales, Secretary Dr. Jackie Cyrus, Treasurer Henrik E. Flock, and Trustee Arguisa. We also have Dr. Judith Wampat, our Chief Academic Officer, to present her testimony. GAC is here to acknowledge with much gratitude the support of the members of the 35th Guam Legislature in the passing of Bill 165-35 and Bill 107-35, now Public Law 35-29 and Public Law 3530, respectively, as signed by the Honorable Governor of Guam, Lourdes Leon Guerrero, on July 19, 2019. Guahan Academy Charter School's community of students, parents, trustees, administrators, faculty, and staff applaud the profound leadership of the primary sponsor, Senators Telina Nelson, Joe S. San Agustin, Amanda L. Shelton, and James Moylan. The charter law has been enacted by the Guam Legislature since 2009, and these legislative measures are landmarked 10 years later. The separation of Guam Academy Charter Schools' budgetary and organizational process from that of the Guam Department of Education now aligns with the intent of the original law, which was authored by GAC's Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Judith Wampat, that intended to separate charter schools from Guam traditional public schools in GDOE. We note with much appreciation that the General Fund Appropriation Act of 2020 officially manifests beyond doubt or question the separation of the charter school budget from that of the Department of Education through a direct appropriation from the general fund to the charter schools. Chapter 2, Education, Part 2, now posture charter schools side by side with Department of Education and other educational institutions, to wit, Part 1, Department of Education, Part 2, Charter School, Part 3, University of Guam, Part 4, Guam Community College, and Part 5, Guam Commission for Educator Certification. This was a novel concept proposed by GACS in the testimony of Chairwoman Faye Valencia Ovales at the public hearing before the Committee on Education on March 15, 2019, regarding charter schools' budgetary and organizational process. I am pleased to attach Chairwoman Ovales' testimony as supporting document of GAC's testimony today. At this same public hearing, I also testified as a former Guam Department of Education Vice Chairperson. I am personally attest that it has been the intent and desire of GEB to separate charter schools' budget from GDOE. A copy of my testimony is also attached, which chronicles the past action by GEB lingering pursuit to separate the budget. In the passage of Public Law 3525, this legislative reaffirmed the validity of the intent of the Guam Academy Charter Schools Act of 2009, now Public Law 29140, by reestablishing that the Guam Department of Administration is duly authorized government entity to administer over the general fund appropriation for charter schools, and 2, the reenacting of the Guahan Academy Charter School funds as a separate and apart from other funds of the government of Guam, which shall not be commingled with any other funds and shall be kept in a separate bank account and administered by the Department of Administration for the operation of Guam Academy Charter Schools. the emphasis added, I am leaving that up to Senate as Dr. Wampet. We also would like to thank you for the increase from the past funding level of $6,088 per pupil to $6,150 per pupil under this appropriation bill. Although GAC had originally sought to have the prior per pupil cost of $6,500 be reinstated, we come today to say we receive every blessing and we will make it work. In closing, we thank you for this rare opportunity to come before your committee, Mr. Chairman, to speak on charter school budget funding. I yield to our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Judith Wampet, the author of the Guam Academy Charter School Act of 2009, Public Law 29140, who is in a better position to explain that Section 12112, Powers and Duties of the Guam Academy Charter School Council, delineates multiple powers and duties of the Guam Academy Charter School Council, but does not extend the power or duty to manage the budgetary operations and administrations of charter schools. Si Jus maasik ginin todos ham Gidzaguahan Academy Charter School in agradeci todo tiempo y adjudun mizu ni hami. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosie. Madam former Speaker Wampet.
Buenas and Hafa Senators. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will give an oral testimony and later on submit then in writing the details of my testimony. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here to address specifically the charter school funding. It is really critical that there will be no misunderstanding, and we want to avoid any type of a conflict, because the way the budget law is written for charter schools is actually contrary to the law that was recently signed by the governor, which is Public Law 35-29, which actually separates the charter school from GDOE. What is in the budget law is that you have actually, instead of putting DOA, which was in Public Law 35-29, you reinstated the council. So everything that DOA was supposed to do, you've put language in turning that responsibility over to the council. And if you look at the public law, the original enabling legislation for the charter school, it does not have that as part of its duties and responsibilities, other than to really monitor the operations of the charter school, to monitor, to make sure we are in compliance, to monitor the progress, to monitor and make sure we turn in our annual report. So that is basically the extent of their authority. If I'm mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and the director of the administration is here, that really for all government entities except for the autonomous agencies, it is the Department of Administration who has that only authority to basically cut the checks for the government and also for the charter schools, and not the council itself. The council has not or do not have the capacity or the staff replicating what's a DOA for them to be able to do what you've asked them to do. So in starting with the title where it says the Guam Academy Charter Council, that in every section that the council itself be removed, and that instead you're reinstated with the Guam Academy Charter School Fund. And then that's for section 1 and 2. For section 3, then instead of the council, it is Department of Administration, and further down, so you can get the gist of this. And the language is in the testimony that's already submitted by our vice chairperson. So I did that, 1, 2, 3. The fourth, of course, is I'd like to, again, thank you for allowing us in the current legislation, 35-29, is for us to use our current budget to pay for our prior year obligations. I'd like to report to you that already we have done a ratification of those prior year obligations. It's all been sent down to DOA to be able to make those payments. We can only pay so much for this year, and the request will be for the next fiscal year is to allow us another year to address then the other 2/3 of or 1/2 of our obligations. We're not here to ask for additional funds to be able to do that. We will work it within our own budget. So we're not going to burden the government with having to pay for that. Last but lastly, on behalf of the 3 charter schools, I know we are requesting for equity, as we stated to you earlier, when DOE came requesting for $11,000 per child. But we did say that at least the minimum would be $6,500 to restore that. I know you called me and indicated that it was $1,150. Anything, of course, could happen. We all know that during the budget session. I know the politics that goes on at that time. So I do understand, and I wish you the best as you work that. On one more thing, I forgot to mention that on the Section 10 of the textbook and collateral materials. I know you made an appropriation of $1.5 million for textbooks. It has always been with DOE. When I was a senator, I had amended the law that was to include then the private schools and to allow them not to be tied into the adopted textbooks by DOE, because their programs, their curriculums are definitely very different. And in that legislation, we allowed then of the private schools to be able then to make the selection of textbooks, and I included supplemental materials. I understand that this year the charter schools were denied. We actually went through the whole process actually of giving us our allocation per pupil. We went through the whole process of submitting our requests. We did stay within, though, their textbook requirement, because that's what they told us, even though I told them the law has changed that. That didn't go anywhere. And lastly, just last month, we received an email that charter schools would not be able to participate in purchasing textbooks or nor supplemental materials. And that's a language I would like to ask you that be clarified. Not just for but to include the charter schools, and to clarify that the language that was used for the private schools, that will also be applicable to the charter schools. So with that, I thank you very much for this opportunity. If you don't have any questions, I will ask to be excused, because we are having our pre-service training for our teachers this week, and we open next week.
Thank you. Does any of my colleagues would like to ask any question of the charter school? If none, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to also recognize colleagues that have joined us today is Senator Sabina Perez and Senator Jose Piru Terlai. We have, before I ask DOA and BBMR to speak, there are some folks that are part of your line agencies that would like to speak. I'd like to bring them up and have them speak first. And I noticed that former Speaker B.J. Cruz is here, the OPA. I have a feeling you wanted to speak, sir. Would you like to speak today, or you're later? Okay, sir. Public Health, Ms. DeNorsi, you can come forward. I know you want more money, but we'll hear your testimony, ma'am. Linda, please.
Good morning, Senator San Agustin, Senator Therese Terlahi, and senators of the 35th Guam Legislature. My name is Linda Ompinko DeNorsi, the Director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services. The Department of Public Health and Social Services is not in support of Bill 186-35. The general fund went from $49,783,496 to $39,228,932, a decline of $10,554,564. Conversely, this special fund rose from 10,500,042 to 13,253,563, an increase of only 2,753,521. Thus, the Department of Public Health and Social Services budget overall was reduced from 60,283,538 to 52,484,495, a decrease of 7,801,043. The bulk of the budget cut was on the Medicaid payment, a reduction of 9,226,185 from the original budget of 13,814,037 to 4,587,852. The Department of Public Health needs the 9,226,185, since this is the total amount needed for the local match of the 18.3 million in Medicaid federal funding. Additionally, Public Health has 45 days to proclaim clean claims and to process them. But there may be erroneous claims that may be submitted at a later time. The Department of Public Health can continue to process claims that were originally submitted during the service delivery date, and these claims can continue to be cleaned out up to a period of 3 years, as long as they were originally submitted during the year of the service delivery time. If the Medicaid funding is cut by $9,226,185, and without a 100% FMAP in FY 2020, there will be a severe Medicaid shortfall of $9,226,185 in FY 2020. On the other hand, if the FMAP at 100% is approved by FY 2020, then the Department of Public Health plans to move the Medicaid local match to MIP to help alleviate the projected $15 million or more in MIP shortfall. However, if the FMAP is not 100% in FY 2020, Public Health and Social Services having only 4,587,852 for Medicaid based on Bill 186-35, which is well below the 9.2 million mark, then this amount cannot be moved to MIP, thus increasing the MIP shortfall even more. Furthermore, Bill 186-35 eliminated $750,000 for medicinal marijuana program, which is needed in order for the Cannabis Regulation Commission to move forward in hiring staff to implement this program, procuring the seed-to-sell software, office equipment, supplies, and contracting services for safety training sessions for the medicinal marijuana program. Hence, the Department of Public Health cannot afford to have a FY 2000 total budget cut of $7,801,043. And again, going from $60,283,538 to $52,482,495. As mentioned, during previous public health budget hearings, the Department of Public Health stayed and requested to stay within its original budget. Didn't ask for an increase, didn't ask for a decrease, asked to remain at $60,283,538. However, again, Bill 186-35 cuts our overall budget, and there would definitely be a severe Medicaid shortfall. And this problem, again, will be further alleviated, and if there is no FMAP, the funding cannot be moved into anywhere, and there will also be an MIP shortfall. And so what does this boil down to? That, again, without the $750,000, medicinal marijuana will not be implemented, and it's not possible to implement this program. The whole public voted for the medicinal marijuana during the election. This is the public's outcry, and this is what we did. And it is worth mentioning that Bill 178-35 was also created to appropriate $1.2 million for the Gumaminaasi Sister Bridget Foster Care Group Home. If the legislature has a surplus in revenues from other sources which will not affect other agencies' FY 2020 budget, Public Health can certainly utilize the additional 1.2 million for the Guma Minaasi Sister Bridget Foster Care Group Home. The Bureau of Social Services Administration, or BOSA, of our Department of Public Health is in dire need of opening up another foster care home because of the shortage of these foster care homes and the increase of foster care children under the Bureau's custody. For instance, in FY 2018, Child Protective Services, or CPS, exerted temporary legal custody of over 225 foster children. There are 276 foster children in Guam's foster care system. Currently, there are 33 licensed foster homes on Guam, and most of them have reached already their license capacity in these homes. Thus, BOSA continues to have difficulties finding foster homes for children that need placement. Foster children have been residing at the Ali 2 Children's Shelter and the Sanctuary Co-ed facility for as long as 14 to 18 months because there are no foster homes available. Additionally, both shelters have reached again their maximum capacity. Thus, there is an urgent need to get the Guma Minaasi Sister Bridget Foster Care Home Group to operate in order to fill this unmet gap in the availability of emergency foster care placements. And as you know, Senators, the building is under construction of this Guma Minaasi. It's about to complete in September 2019. In view of the above, the Department of Public Health requests that the $7,801,043 be reverted back to the FY 2020, and this amount should be inclusive of the $750,000 that was taken out of the FY 2020 budget for the medicinal marijuana. Moreover, if additional funding is available from another source, or there is a surplus of local funding, then an additional 1.2 million should be available for the Guma Minaasi Sister Bridget Foster Care Home. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of my colleagues have any questions? You want to? None. Senator Lai.
Thank you, Director DeNorsi. And can you just, I appreciate what you've stated in your testimony. You've been consistent with this testimony in previous hearings. Can you just clarify, when you say we went from this number to this number, a decline of this amount, what are you comparing? You're comparing this budget bill that's before us and
Yes.
what your request,
And the original
right?
budget, yes, ma'am.
Versus your request.
Yes.
What have you compared this to what you received last year?
Yes,
Would,
the last year
would
budget.
this be even less? Your request was less than what you had been appropriated last year, is that correct?
Based upon last year's appropriation that we submitted, we do have the Excel spreadsheet here, so if you just give me a minute, I'll pull it out real quick. Okay, the overall last year's budget that was requested was a total of 60 million. It's about close to the same.
All right then, okay. Just wanted to verify
Just
that.
wanted to verify too with my Excel spreadsheet.
Yes,
here.
so your request was very similar to what you
Yes.
had received in 2019, but
But they didn't include the medicinal marijuana in this budget at all during that time. And that was why there was a problem with that last year, that it didn't move forward. So I just wanted to point that out. And it did not also include any additional costs relative to the Guma Minaasi as well.
All right, and we had already agreed at a prior hearing that we were you were estimating in your budget way below what you really needed for MIP. And
Yes.
so going even below that, we're looking at some dire consequences.
Right.
What about Medicaid? Did you request in your budget what you need
Yes.
for Medicaid?
It was originally requested of 13 million. I state that in my testament.
Yes.
And then the true picture is really a lot more because we had that surplus supplemental from the Department of the Interior of $3,098,116. That will offset the 16 million to 13 million.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Any other questions from my colleagues? There being none, thank you, Ms. DeNarcy.
You're welcome.
As the, maybe DOA or BBMR, sir?
Hafa Senator San Agustin, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on Bill 186. My name is Lester Carlson, Jr., the Director of the Bureau of Budget and Management Research. Governor Leon Guerrero's executive budget request, which I will, for expediency's sake, refer to as the EBR, Executive Budget Request, was submitted to the legislature on April 8th and outlines a fiscally responsible plan that prioritizes health, safety, and education and allocates attainable general and special fund revenues accordingly. With a focus on the future, the executive budget request would pave the way for prudent spending while reducing and ultimately eliminating the existing general fund deficit and setting aside cash reserves for deposit into the rainy day fund. The rainy day fund provisions contained in sections 20 and 21 of the miscellaneous provisions in the executive budget request are not reflected in Bill 186 and must be restored. A key component of both Bill 186 and the executive budget request is keeping the existing business privilege tax rate at 5%. I have attached a short overview of the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and its overall fiscal impact on Guam. BBMR cannot stress enough how strongly we feel that the retention of the 5% rate is critical to our economy and our ability to continue to provide the governmental services our people depend upon every day. I'd like to thank Chairman San Agustin for including the BPT in Bill 186 at 5%. Thank you, sir. While a majority of the sitting members of the 35th Guam Legislature campaigned with the Leon Guerrero and Tenorio team and surely advocated improving health, safety, and education needs, Bill 186 in its current form does not adequately fund these needs. As an example, the previous speaker spoke at length, but I'll read my testimony. The proposed funding for the Department of Public Health and Social Services is $12,224,584 below the executive budget request level, with $10,236,805 coming at the expense of underfunding the Medicaid match requirements, as well as underfunding the medically indigent program by $11,130,222 as compared to the executive budget request. Similarly, the funding level for the Guam Police Department, as contained in Bill 186, is $2,401,565 below the executive budget request. Differences in forecasting attainable revenues drive this variance between Bill 186 and the executive budget request. Below, I would like to call your attention to the existing variances between Bill 186 and the executive budget request. As you can see, the executive budget request with the 2020 recommendation column on the far right would add $3,692,990 in general fund revenue on top of what is contained in Bill 186. Further, we have attached a very conservative estimate of the fiscal impact of the 2020 census, which neither Bill 186 or the executive budget request contemplated during our collective forecasting. This amounts to an additional $910,609, which BBMR is strongly encouraging to be included in the projection of general fund revenues for fiscal 2020. The resulting difference is an increase of $48,564 over the general fund revenue projected in the executive budget request. Just going through the table real quick, the individual taxes that we are recommending is $73,162,672. That's based upon the current tracking, and so we would like to see a upward adjustment in that category. Under corporate, we agree with the forecast contained in Bill 186. Thank you very much. Similarly, for withholding, the amount that's contained in Bill 186 is very similar to the projection contained in the governor's proposal. Moving down to business privilege tax, we again concur with the amount that is contained in Bill 186. As well as other taxes, we concur. License fees and permits, we concur. The use of money and property, we'd like to ask for consideration to the governor's proposed level. Section 30, we concur. Immigration fees, as everybody is well aware, the H-2 issue is finally taking some traction, and we'd like to get a consideration for an adjustment in the immigration fees because it's tracking at that level. Department charges, we agree with what is contained in Bill 186. So as I mentioned earlier, the overall recommendations for upward adjustments in these general fund categories is $3,692,990. When you add the $910,609 that we conservatively believe is attainable from the withholding taxes and BPT for the census work, which will be done, and there is an attachment as well to the testimony that depicts this. We believe that the final adjusted recommendation to the general fund revenue over the amount that's contained in Bill 186 should be about $4,603,599. A similar situation exists with special fund revenue. BBMR strongly encourages the adoption of the revenue levels contained below, which will cumulatively result in an additional $3,488,571 in the 4 special fund categories below. The 4 special fund categories include the Customs and Quarantine Inspection Services Fund. We'd like to see an adjustment there. The Guam Highway Fund, the Healthy Futures Fund, which we believe that we're getting some concurrence from OFB during our discussions of late. And then the Tourist Attraction Fund. We'd like to see a little bit of an adjustment there. Moving on, federal matching funds were reduced by $7.6 million as compared to the executive budget request. The reductions in anticipated federal dollars to be received in the following departments include a reduction at the Department of Public Health in the amount of $5.3 million, a reduction at the Department of Military Affairs, a reduction of $2.1 million, DICIT, basically a reduction of $432,313, and GCC, a reduction in federal matching funds of $116,549. The anticipated federal matching funds noted are not merely for informational purposes due to the requirement of local matching funds. The Bureau is concerned that the reduction in the anticipated federal matching funds will limit the availability of federal funds and may cause such federal fund dollars to be returned to the grantor agencies, and also may result in a reduction of future federal funds to be awarded, specifically for multi-year grants. The federal funds amount contained in the executive budget request should be reflected as opposed to the version contained in Bill 186. Upon the restoration of the general fund revenues, special fund revenues, and federal matching grants and aid revenue available for appropriation, BBMR and the fiscal team will work to seek the approval from the 35th Guam Legislature for the passage of the funding and provisions contained in Bill 7535, which is the executive budget request. For the record, BBMR has met with the Office of Finance and Budget on several occasions to better understand the development of Bill 186. OFB has been very professional and courteous, and we believe this interaction will continue in a mutual effort to best serve the people of Guam. BBMR has also provided guidance and advice to OFB in an open and transparent manner, which we believe demonstrates the ability to work together for a common cause. I'd like to go over some of the review aspects of Bill 186. First, we noted that there was an underappropriation of $1,160,000 in the general fund. BBMR has made this aware to OFB, and we have we're striving to be able to apply this $1.16 million to augment the funding for the Guam Police Department to the tune of $500,000. And OFB is considering BBMR's request to direct the remaining $660,000 to fund the Competitive Wage Act study, which is estimated to be $350,000, with the remaining funds of $310,000 to fund the operational needs of the Department of Corrections. An over-appropriation of $4,490,000 was also noted in Bill 186. Again, these levels or the funding sources included the Guam Highway Fund, the Health Professional Licensing Office Revolving Fund, the Solid Waste Operations Fund, and the Tourist Attraction Fund. Again, BBMR provided OFB with information on where the over-appropriations were, and we understand that OFB has made the necessary revisions. For the executive branch, the total general fund and special fund appropriations to the executive branch reflects an overall reduction of $11 million as compared to the executive budget request, with $5.5 million in general fund appropriations and a reduction of a similar amount in special fund appropriations. For the Office of the Governor, it reflects a reduction of $222,133 and a special fund out of the general fund, and a special fund reduction of $8,668 for an overall reduction of $230,801 as compared to the executive budget request. BBMR respectfully requests the restoration of the funding for the Office of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor to a rollover status similar to what was appropriated and approved for fiscal 19. The legislature, there is an overall general fund increase of $283,174 as compared to the executive budget request. And we note that both the legislature and the Office of Finance and Budget are proposed to receive increases in Bill 186. The Judiciary, I'm not surprised that Justice Merriman was pleased because Bill 186 basically has a $2 million increase over the executive budget request. We also note that the requested amount for the Family Visitation Center was not funded under Bill 186. Other departments, elected offices, the Mayor's Council, Office of Attorney General, Public Defender, Office of Public Accountability, GVB, all of these agencies cumulatively reflected an increase both in the general fund and in the special funds for their respective agencies. General fund increase was $677,029, and special fund increase cumulatively to all these departments and agencies was $2,397,974. Section 7 of Chapter 11 of Bill 186 makes an appropriation from the general fund of $3.3 million and $5.9 million from the Territorial Education Facilities Fund to the Department of Administration for the Guam Department of Education lease at the Tejan. This is the first instance of a general fund subsidy for the Tejan lease, which has been fully funded by TEFF in prior years. Section 7 of Chapter 11 of Bill 186 also reflects a technical error error in the appropriation language for the Teason High School, resulting in an underappropriation of $805,983.97 from the general fund to cover the full requirement of $4,170,155.97 per Public Law 34116 for the base rent, and also an underappropriation of $23,860.03 from the TEFF to cover the full requirement of $829,844.03 per Public Law 34116 for insurance and maintenance costs at the Teason facility. BBMR has also informed OFB of the need to address this error. Bill 186 does not fund the following miscellaneous appropriations contained in executive budget request. Very noticeably is the lack of the funding of the triennial property revaluation, $2 million. As I mentioned earlier, $350,000 for the Competitive Wage Act study update. As Mrs. DeNorsi mentioned earlier, $750,000 for the medicinal marijuana lab, and $1 million for the Pacific Islands Development Bank. Of note, $150,000 is not reflected in Bill 186 to continue to provide funding for the Autism Center. Miscellaneous provisions, again, I'd like to be able to reiterate that there is no mention in Bill 186 as it relates to sections 20 and 21 of the executive budget request. We'd like to be able to see that restored. We believe that it's a fiscally prudent and necessary measure. It is cash funded, and we believe that we can make manage the needs of the government of Guam and still be able to provide that rainy day fund cash set aside. Section 18 of Chapter 12 includes language to change the provisions to the temporary employment of retired attorneys. Basically, their pay scale went up, and we'd just like to point out that this may result in a possible increase of about $38,232 per retired attorney rehired in 2020. This might be a necessary evil, but there is a budgetary consequence to it. We also would like to note for the record that there are several miscellaneous provisions that are not reflected in Bill 186. I will point out that there is the creation of the inmate commissary, but I believe that's being addressed in another bill before this body. Also, the provision to establish a civilian volunteer territorial park patrol officer reserve at the Department of Parks and Recreation, and the volunteer police reserve allowance amendment are not reflected in Bill 186. Administrative provisions, we'd like to point out that we were seeking for the provision to provide for the authorization for payment of prior year obligations. I believe that was echoed earlier by the charter school people. We'd like for that to continue. Provisions for the Office of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and the Guam State Clearinghouse to enter into agreements with independent contractors pursuant to the Guam Procurement Law. We'd also like for consideration and reinstatement into the budget bill for the provision that would provide authorization for the Department of Revenue Taxation to utilize the Better Public Service Fund for tax collection efforts. Similarly, we'd also like for the body to consider a provision that would allow for off-island travel for the purposes of executive security, to amend the travel restrictions to allow for that to occur. BBMR also advised OFB on the revenue split relating to both the Manpower Development Fund and the Safe Streets Act. Finally, BBMR advised OFB to net out the 2019 general obligation bond payments, as these payments for debt service are coming out of the Guam Solid Waste Authority. Similarly, the budget for GSWA should reflect this amount from the anticipated GSWA revenues, it should be netted out, as well as a provision to continue to make payments to the host community funds, which is not contained in Bill 186. Mr. Chairman, with the restoration of revenues to the executive budget request level and a willingness to support the administration in their first full year of leadership, I would like to end with the following quote from the Governor's address to the Speaker and members of the 35th Guam Legislature. As our administration embarks on its journey in this new era of change, we hope you will join us in making this shift in values, committing to sound fiscal discipline, and realigning priorities as it relates to public safety, health, and education. We are cognizant that lasting change is achieved one step at a time. Our FY 2020 executive budget request details a comprehensive plan that prioritizes fiscal discipline, maintains fiscal solvency, and ensures our government continues to work towards fiscal stabilization and economic prosperity for our island and people. Again, that was a quote from the Governor's transmittal message to the legislature upon the submission of her 2020 executive budget requests. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my testimony. Thank you very much. I also have 10 written testimonies that I'd like to provide your staff, coming from various different agencies within the government of Guam, for the record.
Thank you. Does any of my colleagues have any question of the office of BBMR or the representative of the governor's office? Anybody have any questions? If you want to. Other than that, I just remind my colleagues that when we do go to the floor, BBMR, Mr. Lester will be there, so is Mr. Burns. When we're on the committee of the whole, we'll be able to ask any question and make the changes on the budget. So, is any of my colleagues would like to still ask questions? Feel free. Senator Terlai.
I just would like to ask, in preparation for that session, if we could get a list of prior year obligations for every agency, because you're asking for authority to pay prior year obligations, and I'm just wondering if you must have some of these already listed for what you're either able or not able to pay during 2019, or from prior years even. And is that going to be possible? Can we get at least a list of those things?
Actually, I believe, ma'am, that was part of the packet that was received by OFB.
Okay, great.
So, and again, this is to the extent that their budgetary allocation allows for, some of the payments for prior year obligations. I think the language it's cautionary, to the extent that it doesn't hamper your core mission. And if you have funds available and you deem that you can pay some of these prior year obligations, then it would allow for them to do that.
All right, and can you just explain this change that you want to be incorporated regarding the rainy day fund? Because I'm looking at it, it just looks like it's reducing the amount that we're going to keep in there. Do we have a balance in our rainy day fund right now?
No, we don't.
All right, so this...
Thank you, ma'am. That's a very timely question. What I like to call the back of the executive budget request has a very lengthy section with some amendments to the existing rainy day fund. All of those provisions, not only was the funding not reflected in Bill 186, but the teeth of the proposed strengthening of the rainy day fund, which is contained in the back, is not reflected. So that's my reference to sections 20 and 21 of the executive budget request.
Yes, so I read those sections, and it looks to me like this bill is appropriating a certain amount, 2%, to the rainy day fund, right?
Actually, it's a deficit reduction / rainy day.
Okay.
It doesn't have the same characteristics with respect to the rainy day fund, because the rainy day fund, as we've put forth in our proposal, is a cash-funded mechanism. It will allow for reserves to be built up. It has a 10-vote requirement for access into any of the funds that would be deposited into the rainy day fund.
Right, but your
Where-
language,
Whereas Bill 186 just appropriates 98% of the revenue that's available.
so you think that the rainy day fund that is referred to in this bill is different than the one
It
that
looks
you're
more just
referring
like the set aside for deficit reduction that
all
you've seen in previous bills.
All right, so you want it specifically into that
Yes, ma'am.
statutory rainy day fund.
Yes.
But you're also making changes to reduce the amount that's going to stay in that fund from 25% to 10%.
10% of, I think, the average general fund revenues over like a 3-year period.
Right. So that's a reduction to the statutory amount, the current, right? And then it also makes a change from continuing, or you want a continuing appropriation versus an upfront appropriation? I guess I wanted to understand why you use that word, that continuing appropriation.
In the rainy day fund?
Yes.
Uh,
You're asking for that change in the statute, yeah.
You know, we'd like to be able to establish a very sound fiscal tool. We'd like for the authorization to be continuous so that in 2021, if there was a desire, it'd have to be an overt action that would negate the continuation of deposits into the rainy day fund. So we'd like the fund to be recognized, the practice to be recognized, and for this to be institutionalized.
All right, so your issue is not with how the language is right now, an appropriation of a certain amount at upfront.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll let it go. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Lester. I'd ask, we have here listed, Mr. Steve McManus, you're here, sir? And we have Public Defender, Steve Hattori. And Speaker Cruz, do you plan on testifying, sir? No? Okay. I'd ask Mr. McManus, I know you submitted your testimony here. Sir? You can just state your name and then continue.
Today, I am Stephen McManus, the Vice Chairman of Career Tech High Academy Charter School. Greetings, distinguished senators, and Mr. Chairman, Senator Joe San Agustin. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify in regards to Bill 186-35. And may I also give deference to the Chairman of Career Tech High, former Governor of Guam, Mr. Felix Camacho, who gives his greetings and his apology for not being here today due to important family matters. And so he has entrusted this testimony to me. First of all, I want to thank you for your overwhelming support of Bill 5735, which was specifically lobbied for by Career Tech High in order to meet the conditions set by the Guam Academy Charter School Council. So I kindly request, Mr. Chairman, that you fund Career Tech High for the upcoming fiscal year 2020 budget as required by law, or as enabled by law. It has come to my understanding that you believe that because the Guam Academy Charter School Council granted us a charter that was conditionally approved, that it does not mean the same thing as the word approved, even though the conditions were met, and that therefore we must resubmit our petition all over again to the council for a clear statement that says approved. I agree with you that these two terms do not mean the same thing, that if Career Tech High was given a condition that needed to be fulfilled and it did not, then of course it has not met the legal requirements to be approved. But if the specific condition was indeed fulfilled, then the approval stands as intended. May I please use an example to explain my point? When I went to Voctech back in 81 through 84, when GCC was a standalone tech school, I took automotive for all 3 years. Finally, in my senior year, I passed the auto electrical exam proctored by the National Institute of Automotive Service Excellence on our campus. However, even though I took 3 years of automotive and passed their official exam, I was only conditionally certified by NIASI on the basis that I still needed to fulfill one more condition, which was 2 years of apprenticeship in an actual auto shop. So I worked for Aaron's Brake Check in Tamuning for 2 years. And when the condition was met, NIASI didn't tell me, listen, Steve, at the time you passed the test, you were only conditionally approved. And just because you have now fulfilled 2 years of apprenticeship, you need to go back to GCC, take 3 years of automotive, and take the test all over again so that you can get approved. While this sounds absurd, that is exactly what we at Career Tech High are being told to do. To go back and do the process all over again, all over a misinterpretation of what I believe is a misinterpretation of clear language which simply states that so long as the condition, which is the removal of the limits at the time, is fulfilled, then Career Tech High Academy Charter School can be fully approved. Now, if your interpretation is different from that, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to put this in as respectful. I respect your work and I thank you for what you have done, but we were not informed of this when you were the education chairman in the 34th legislature, and I made an appeal for our school for funding in 2018, or when Bill 57 was first introduced back in March 7th of this year, or even after I reached out to your office 17 times, starting from September 26, 2017, up to this week, in email letters addressed to you or CC'd to you regarding the approval and funding of Career Tech High. In the 2 years of reaching out to your office, I have not received a call or a message, let alone the honor of meeting with you. I even left one message to ask that if you could not meet with me, then at least give me some counsel in an email message. In the real world, when a condition that was originally set is fulfilled, the approval becomes automatic. Even banks do this, and we all know how strict and technical banks are. I agree. If a bank gives clear requirements for loan approval and it is fulfilled, there is no reason not to grant final approval. They would be more hard-pressed to argue to the underwriter why they did not approve the loan as opposed to arguing why they did approve the loan. In fact, arguing in favor of the loan would be redundant since the approval is implied by the conditions already fulfilled. So the same goes with our school. The Guam Academy Charter School Council gave us a huge list of requirements to be awarded a charter, from curriculum, staffing, classrooms, equipment, enrollment procedures, budget, accreditation, busing. The list goes on. And after months of hard work and thousands of dollars of labor, we submitted a complete petition. After thorough scrutiny and review, the Guam Academy Charter School Council gave us a conditional approval. The condition had nothing to do with the contents of the petition itself. It simply had to do with the Charter School Act itself that had a limit of non-converted schools. The logic was clear. Remove the limit and you are fully approved. The word approved in the term conditionally approved has to mean something. And the word conditional in the term conditionally approved also has to mean something. That condition was met. Finally, it was no secret that the main reason for Bill 57 in the first place was not just so in case some new school comes along and applies for a charter. Everyone knew it was because Career Tech High was in the waiting. I lobbied every senator, and I met with most of them, to support Bill 57 so we can start this year. I was never advised that upon passage of the law that I would have to reapply retroactively. In fact, I was told by many senators that if the bill passes, then our school would be good to go. And then, by God's grace, a supermajority of 12 senators voted in favor of the bill. So, in closing, based on the goodwill intention of our good senators, I have parents and families from Agate to Talafofa, from Molesta to even Jigo, that are waiting to put their kids in our school. Since the bill passed, I took liberty to start pre-registration on our website, careertechguam.org, and so my roster is growing. Do I go back and tell my parents to cancel their enrollment because the legislature does not mean what it says and says what it does not mean? Distinguished senators and Mr. Chairman, I simply ask that you acknowledge that Career Tech High Academy Charter School is indeed approved because the conditions have already been fulfilled by the Guam Academy Charter Schools Council and even Bill 5735, and to please fund what has been enabled by law. Si Diyos masi.
Thank you, Mr. McManus.
Thank you, sir.
Any of my colleagues have any questions? I will get back with you, Mr. McManus.
Thank you.
In
Thank you,
reference to this.
Thank you.
Mr. Hattori?
Okay. Good morning, Chairman St. Augustine. Good morning as well, Chairperson Terlahi, our Oversight Chair, Senators on the Committee on Operations, Appropriations, and Housing. My name is Stephen P. Hattori. I am the current Director of the Public Defender Service Corporation. I'll just give a little background. Our office was created in 1975 to fulfill the mandate of Gideon versus Wainwright, which guarantees everyone a right to counsel regardless of income. Basically, we represent the underrepresented, the underprivileged, the lower class of society. And basically, our clients are your constituents. Before I begin my testimony, I also want to thank the committee. Ordinarily, we present our budget before you, as many other agencies did earlier this year. We didn't take that as a slight. We took that as a compliment that we submitted a budget that you guys felt did not really need too much discussion. And so we want to thank you for that. Saved us a few hours of our day. Anyways, and when we looked at the Bill 18635, we see that it reduces our request by $132,172. In the grand scheme of things, that is a small amount. As it pertains to our office, it's something that we can live with. Since 1975, we've been doing more with less, and we'll continue to do that. So we do support Bill 18635. It will not, we don't believe it will hamper our operations at all. And in fact, in the future, we're also seeking grants to help us expand our services. We have a STOP grant through the Office of Violence Against Women, and that helps pay for us to provide protective orders for individuals who are suffering from abuse. We're also pursuing other grants. We've received several federal grants, technical assistance grants through the Bureau of Justice, the National Legal Aid and Defender Association. And every year I come before the legislature saying that we're going to try to pursue the legal services grant for the Manamco. And I haven't given up on that dream. We're still trying to work on that because we believe that our attorneys can provide a great wealth of services that are currently not being provided. And so I'm not, of course, reading directly from my letter. I did submit my testimony previously. But I would like to comment on several provisions within the bill. First is, I'm not sure if the budget for the judiciary includes an 8th judge. Currently, the budget we submitted is one for 7 judges and 3 magistrates. That's 10 judicial officers. We currently appear before 10 judicial officers and the Supreme Court of Guam. We have 15 attorneys currently. We're budgeted for 16, but we're having difficulty locating someone to fill that position. And so if we just want to let the legislature know if there is going to be an 8th judge, that we will be part of the group of agencies that will probably be needing more personnel. I'm sure the Office of the Attorney General is going to need attorneys. APD's already had a 6th attorney approved should an 8th judge be hired, and so we'll probably need additional support if an 8th judge is appointed. The next issue is the attorney shortage. We do have a 16th attorney position that's vacant. We haven't been able to fill it. We're still looking, so if you know anybody out there, just send them our way. But we noticed that there is a section allowing the Office of the Attorney General to hire retired government attorneys. This shortage of attorneys affects basically every agency on Guam that may or may not that hires attorneys. And so we ask that this exception provided to the Office of the Attorney General be extended to our office and maybe other offices as well. I know one of our former attorneys who's retired was a tax attorney before. I'm sure he might be interested in working for the Department of Revenue Tax if he were able to double dip. But I think we've reached that point where there's such a shortage of attorneys that really we're going to have to ask our retired warriors to come back, put on their suits, and see if they're willing to work for a little bit more. And I know that the BBMR indicated that it would cost more, but it wouldn't cost the general fund more. The cost would shift to the retirement. You know, they'll be earning the retirement that they've worked hard to receive, and then we'll just supplement them with pretty much paying them half of what they would get when they retired. I mean, attorneys that are retiring at $140,000 would only be coming in at about $78,000, but they'll be doing the same amount of work. I mean, that's pretty much, that would be great for our clients. And so we just ask that that exception provided to the Office of Attorney General also apply to our office and maybe even other offices. Like, for example, the court, they might want to be able to hire a retired attorney as a law clerk. I mean, that would be a dream job for me once I get fired from my job. Anyways, the other thing we wanted to bring up is the Executive Branch Transfer Authority. It's a little unfortunate that DOA and BBMR's left. In 2018, you know, we received a budget from the legislature, and we were expecting to receive this budget. The DOA has withheld some of our allotments. I think the total amount ended up being over $500,000. They've told us that we won't be getting that amount of money. So although the legislature fully supported us, gave us the budget that we needed, DOA failed to provide that money to us. Technically, it's it's an impoundment that we believe is against the law, but it would take a lawsuit really to force them to pay us. And so we really appreciate the fact that in this current year's budget, that same language exists that would prevent the executive branch from basically transferring funds from the Office of the Attorney General, from our office, from the Judiciary, from the Office of Public Auditor, and other certain departments. And so we just ask that that particular language continue. Maybe there should be some language added that would prevent DOA from withholding our regular allotment. And you know, and it's happening still this year. I just want to bring it up while I'm here before the legislature, that DOA's been withholding about 15% of our budget that you guys approved last year. They haven't given us what basis they believe that. We provided them with the authority, showing them that you know, they lack the authority to withhold our allotments. And so that's something we're trying to clear up right now. We're projecting that they will have withheld about, let me see. Yeah, approximately 651,000 of our the budget that you approved last year. That's the amount we're expecting DOA to withhold. At least that's what they've informed us. We will continue to try to have these monies returned to us. And these monies are really essential for us to provide the basic services for our indigent population. We're hoping to, of course, expand those services in the future. And with the support of the legislature, we hope we can. I don't have anything else to add. I submitted written testimony, and I won't go through all the details. If there are any questions, I would love to answer it.
Thank you, sir. We will be requesting for an official letter of every agency that have not received their allocation to validate what you've stated, and then
Okay.
provide you that response.
Yes,
Because we'll be very
I was
curious
going
to know.
to FOIA them, but I thought that was impolite, so I'm
Nope.
glad someone's looking into it.
We'll do that. We'll do that part. And any of my colleagues have any question of Mr. Atori? Ma'am? Anything? No. You're tempted?
Was there any reason provided to your office on the 15% holding back that allotment?
We've not received an explanation, and we've provided them the language from the budget bill, which exempts us from them transferring funds from our budget. But we're trying to meet with them to resolve this issue.
Mr. Torre, we do have the director of DOA behind you. We'll ask him to come forward, and maybe if he's willing to, I was going to send an official letter for everybody, but at least on your agency, he can give an explanation, please. Thank you, sir.
Senator, by chance, I have the numbers in front of me. We've actually paid just over $3 million to the Public Defender's Office as of the end of 2 weeks ago, which is the last time I drew up this report. I noticed that, leaving aside the reserve, and I'll address that in a minute, we were $80,000 short of what we should have paid by that period, and I instructed the department to pay that last week. The $651,000 is the 15% reserve that BBMR and DOA puts aside on almost all the budget allocations until such time as it can be seen that it is possible to release that reserve without endangering the budgetary or cash situation of the government. I really don't think that I've actually been asked by the public defender anything about that particular matter. Had I had been asked, I would have said exactly what I have said right now.
What are you going to do with the reserves?
Well, assuming that there is no danger to the budget, all the reserves will be released by BBMR, and that will result in the cash being released during this financial year, at the end of the financial year. My department has been instructed, because BBMR, when they release a reserve, it's just a number. To us, it's cash, and I've instructed my department to make sure that, all things being equal, there is sufficient cash to do that.
All right. So you're hoping, your plan is to release all the reserves, and so Public Defender can kind of count on theirs, this $651,000.
That's the plan.
All right, thank you. And when you said it's been reserved for almost all agencies, which ones has it not been reserved from?
We don't keep any money back for DOE because they always seem to be teetering on the edge.
All right.
But we do for UOG and GCC, and we've given them exactly the same message.
All right, so it's August now. Would they expect these reserves to be released in August or September, or you're saying after October?
Well, we would endeavor to do it in September, so it stays in this
All right.
financial year, assuming everything goes as planned.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
And
Byrne.
I would like to
Sir?
add, historically, they've done that. They've paid us outstanding allotments after the end of the fiscal year, except for fiscal year 2018. That was the first year that they did not pay us our full appropriated amount.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Tom Kreis, sir, did you want to speak on behalf of UOG, or you're going to submit a testimony and then we'll... Okay, then you submit a written testimony. Speaker Cruz, OPA, thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the legislature. I wouldn't have spoken this morning, but for the fact that the Bureau of Budget had a gross misstatement at the bottom of their page where he stated other departments and elected offices, and he listed the Office of Public Accountability, and it says reflects an overall general fund increase of $77,029, and special fund increase of $2,397,000. That is a gross mischaracterization. Mr. Chairman, you know that this Bill 186 cuts the Office of Public Accountability even more than I cut it last year. It's even less than what was appropriated last year. And so I just needed to correct that misstatement because I didn't want anybody in the public to think that we had anywhere from a $677,000 or a $2 million increase. It isn't true. In this budget, we lost an additional about $40,000, I think, in the appropriation, and it was less. It's lower by almost $200,000 from what we had requested. As you know, Mr. Chairman, the Office of Public Accountability, when I took over and implemented the fiscal year 2019 budget, I had to release 5 individuals. Thankfully, your office recognized the value of 2 of them and picked them up. But that was because the Office of Public Accountability had an appropriation of $1.4 million, and it was reduced to 1.15. We reduced it, or 2.5. And that meant that we had to release people. We had 2 probationary employees, and we had 3 unclassified employees. When I asked Civil Service said if I was going to release the 2 probationary employees so that I wouldn't have them as permanent employees and have to pay all kinds of additional payments, I was told by Civil Service that I had to release the 3 unclassified employees. And that was very painful because that cost us 45 years of experience in the office. And it was not something that I willingly did, but it was something that I had to do in order to meet the budget that we had. As it was last year, the Office of Public Accountability had to pay DOA an additional $200,000 at the end of the fiscal year because the office had overspent its personnel allocation. And I was, as the Public Accountability Office and the Public Auditor, I was not going to do the same thing. And so I had to stay within what, as you would say, I had to hang by my own petards. I had reduced the budget and I had to suffer it. And this year I asked for an additional $150,000 in the hopes that maybe I might be able to add 2 more entry-level personnel so that we could start to do a little more. But after listening to the testimony that was given earlier, I'm embarrassed to ask that at this point. But I will tell you that I'm a little concerned. The budget that I submitted took into account the small increments that, I didn't realize it until I was handling the office. I didn't realize how small the increments are for our employees if they were going to get an increase. Because in this year, we suspended it. And so no one was supposed to get an increase. But if there was to be an increase, some of my top employees are only going to be getting like an additional $1,500, if that much. And so it was difficult. So the budget does include, or at least the budget that we submitted included all the reclassifications of the 3 public auditor 3s that are still sitting there to move them into public accountability auditor 3s if they can qualify. And it was going to allow for some upward mobility and to hire 2 more people at the bottom end. But it's obvious that I'm getting cut even more, so I'm not going to be able to do that. I will be able to probably deal with the increments now that this budget is lifting it. But I do want to call to the attention of the of the committee, there is another provision in the law, the certification law of of auditors. And you know how I feel about that. It's still in the law. It's not, I went through 186. It is not suspended, and it's not amended. It's not repealed, so it's there. If this budget passes without a suspension or without a repeal or without an amendment, I will need an additional $70,000 just to pay for the certification pay for those on my staff that are qualified. It wasn't in my budget request because I didn't ask for it. But if this legislature is going to leave it in the budget, then I will have to comply and provide them with their certification adjustment, and that would cost the office an additional $70,000. So I just point that out. But after listening to Public Health and Social Services, I'm hesitant to push the matter at this point.
Thank you, Speaker. And a few of the colleagues are actually asking to make sure that you're funded, even the 70,000. We're looking into that right now, trying to make sure that provide you the adequate funding so you can keep your office running, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, because they are an excellent staff. I mean,
Yes.
it hurt me to lose the 3 unclassified, because that really was 45 years of experience. But I can't tell you how wonderful the 5 Auditor 3s that stepped up to take over the management team of the office has been, and how smoothly it has run since then. They've taken over, and I feel so bad that they can't get we can't reclassify 3 of them, 4 of them. I mean, because all promotions and increments were suspended during the fiscal year. So I can't do any reclassifications and give them increments as minuscule as it is by comparison. But it is the Office of Public Accountability, and we have to live within the law, and we will live within the law. And if it is provided to us, we'll provide it to them. If it's not, then we'll have to tell them that it's not going to be provided. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any question from my colleagues on the Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, was the certification pay put on hold for just 1 fiscal year?
Yes, it was in the budget bill. We
So just
suspended all additional increases.
All right.
And if it's not, then we're going to have to
Okay. Thank you.
provide it.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'd have 2. We have Mr. Ken and we have Mr. Kenga. If you both can come forward. If you want to do an oral testimony, you can come forward. And we'll start with Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero, and Mr. Kenga.
I'm Ken Leon Guerrero with the Guam Citizens for Public Accountability. I'm sitting here with a sense of deja vu because the last time I testified at a budget hearing was in 2016. And in 2016, I sat before a group of senators and talked about the possibility that we would be seeing major impacts on government revenues as a result of the Trump tax cuts that were being floated around in Congress. And this legislature, the 34th didn't pay any attention. And as a result, they were forced to go back to the people of Guam, reach in our pockets, and take another 25% out of our disposable income. And then they went ahead and passed the fuel tax, which further restricted our disposable income. My disposable income in the last 2 years has gone down by 34%. It's affected every aspect of my life. I come to town twice a week instead of every day, and I've made a number of other changes. Now, the reason I bring this up is this legislature is contemplating a budget that's very similar to the budget of Albuquerque, New Mexico. 565,000 people, and they have a budget that's 15 million, proposed budget, $15 million more than the budget being proposed here before the legislature. But there are some differences. Guam has a gross domestic product of 5.1 million. Albuquerque, New Mexico has a gross domestic product of 38 million. Guam has 44,662 households to spread the budget load across. Albuquerque, New Mexico has 121,000 households to spread their city budget load across. Here on Guam, the per household budget load, based on what's proposed, is $22,000 per household. The budget load in Albuquerque, New Mexico is $4,100. You see, this is the policy-making body. This is the check-writing body. But you're not acting as though you're the policymakers. You're not acting as though you're physically responsible people, because all of you campaigned with the promise that you were going to streamline the government, you were going to put in a sense of financial responsibility and accountability. But we're not seeing that. And the budget that's laying on this table right now before you is proof of that. If you were the policymakers, you would look at the people of Guam. You would see how the people of Guam are suffering, and you would say, what can we do to ease their burden? What steps can we make to reduce the cost of government? And it's a very important decision to make, and I'll tell you why. I know you guys don't watch the news, but just as in 2016, when I was pointing out economic factors that affected Guam around the world, we have a series of events taking place in Asia as the economy of Asia is grinding down. We have country after country going into negative growth. We have thousands of companies across Asia that are slowing down and laying off people. And the three I highlight specifically are Japan, South Korea, and China. Now you think, what do Japan, South Korea, and China have to do with Guam? Well, that's where the bulk of our tourists come from. And right now, when you look at the carnage taking place on Wall Street, we were down over 1,000 points today, the largest single drop in history. We're seeing that the economic factors outside our island are going to be affecting our island's revenues sooner than later. But instead of taking a cautious approach like we citizens are forced to do, we don't see any effort whatsoever to rein in government spending. I mean, even the speaker came up here and asked for more money. Former speaker came up here and asked for more money. Every single department of government of Guam is asking for more money than before. And when we look at the fact that at the start of the Calvo administration, we were under $500 million. In 10 years, we're now at $1 billion. Have we seen any improvement in government services at the people level? I honestly can't say I have. But still, we persist with this myth that, $900 million is doable. We can afford that. I remember when the budget hit $1 billion in Hawaii, and there was just people wringing their hands. And at the time the budget hit in Hawaii, it was in the 80s, and we had 1.5 million people. Well, here we are, 164,000 people, of which over 100,000 do not work. So we are carrying the entire economy on the backs of 65,000 people, many of whom have multiple jobs. Their quality of life sucks because they have multiple jobs, and the majority of them worry how they're going to make ends meet from paycheck to paycheck, myself included, because I am a senior citizen living on a fixed income, and over the past 2 years, my disposable income has dropped by 1/3. And now we're hearing the government talking about growing. We're hearing pay raises. We're seeing pay raises, massive pay raises, retroactive pay raises. I think there's even a line item in BBMR to retroactively compensate someone. Now we see there's line item in the budget to do another pay study. And then we look at every single board and commission, and every single board and commission, every new person that came on started at step 13. So we have people starting, instead of starting at step 1 when they go on to a board and commission at 75 or 80,000, they're starting at 160. And in the meantime, you guys are talking about raising all the rates and fees for government of Guam because they haven't been raised in years. Well, what about the salaries for the people who pay the taxes? They haven't been raised in years either. So if you guys are the people's representatives, you need to start acting like the people's representatives. And the first thing you do is you draw a line in the sand and say, based on realistic projections, and we have to look at realistic projections because right now the government of Guam is doing what they've always done and follow unrealistic projections. That's why we have a $100 million deficit. That's why, over the past few years, departments get shorted their funds because we've used unrealistic expectations. We know that there's a better than 60% chance that the tourist economy is going to slow down. We know with 80% probability that the federal government is going to be cutting programs. So when they start cutting programs, funding for programs, who do you think is going to get cut? Texas with 2 senators and 36 representatives, or Guam with no senator and no voting representative? We're going to see reductions. You have to deal with reality. And you need to start planning for the reality, because if the worst case scenario happens and there are no reductions from the federal government and there are no decreases in tourism, then you'll probably have enough money to pay off the operating deficit we've accumulated over the past 5 years. But if these projections come true, if tourism drops, if federal funding, which is about 1/3 of the government's revenue, drops, what are you going to do? I can tell you what you're going to do. You're going to say, oh, we need to raise the business privilege tax to 6%. We need to raise all the government fees by 10%. And the people of Guam just can't afford it. We're already losing people. Probably at the rate of 10 to 15 households a month are leaving Guam. And it's because they're looking for places with more opportunities and a better quality of life that they're not finding here on Guam. You guys set the policy. You guys write the check. Do it as if you were writing the check out of your own pockets instead of ours. And then maybe, just maybe, we'll see some sanity return to this budgeting process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Mr. Longro. Does any of my colleagues have any questions? Thank you, Ken. Mr. King.
Half a day. All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Senator Joseph Agustin, Senators Pito Terlahi, Sabina Perez, Luis Muñoz, and Senator Will Castro. I come before you to speak on my own capacity. Obviously, I was tuning in to the channel and I saw the testimony earlier from the former speaker, Judy Wampat, regarding charter schools. So if I may, her testimony earlier spoke about proposed amendments that will remove the council's ability to review invoices provided by the schools. I caution that with the removal of the council, it brings up a lot of concerns. First, without the council, I don't see what other safeguards would be in place for the government to ensure its accountability of government resources. We talk about everyone in the agencies here that are asking for more resources. The charter schools were the only ones that weren't. So it makes you wonder what else the government can do to ensure that those resources are being used prudently and efficiently. I also believe the administration supports the success of Guam's charter schools while maintaining accountability and the prudency mentioned earlier. This is further supported with the appointment of 3 new members to the council that are currently being heard by this body, and hopefully giving them the opportunity to provide quorum for the council. Beyond that, I just remain open to perhaps further discussion with other members present, maybe not in this budget bill, but perhaps as a standalone bill that can be heard and entertained. But on the face value, I do not support that proposed amendment. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Ken. Mr. Ken, aren't you one of the council members, right?
I was appointed. Yeah, my confirmation hearing was heard, but the body has yet to vote on that confirmation.
Okay, well, I look forward to you being on the council. I know you, so we're good. You're straight up. I appreciate that. Does any of my colleagues have any question of Mr. Kenga? None. Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenga. There being no one else to speak, I'd like to first advise my colleagues that I have a proposed changes to Bill 186. It's 39 pages. I'll be providing everyone a copy that would make changes. It'll update basically 186 to some of the amounts that BBMR brought up, some of the technical corrections in the bill. I'll provide everybody a copy, and for your review. Did you want to speak? Okay, next time. Okay, but hold on, okay? But just have a seat. So my colleagues, you'll be receiving a copy. It addresses things like one of them, the Guam Highway Fund, from 24 million increased about another 200-some thousand, and then when it gets to the floor, then we can debate about who would get the funding. Okay? We'll discuss that more. Sir, I know you're from the Youth Congress, so.
Afade, Senators of the 35th Guam Legislature. My name is DeMarco Kaneni. I'm a Guam Youth Congress representative from the municipality of Ordao Chalampago, and I am also the Vice Chairman on the Committee on Economic Development, Labor, and Tourism. I'm here to testify on behalf of the Guam Youth Congress on the appropriations that were finally listed in the budget this fiscal year. Although I do appreciate at least the initial amount that was offered, it is nowhere close to what the Youth Congress needs to operate at a at least non-ceremonial, non-skeletal level. Because at the current standing, the Youth Congress operates at a very ceremonial, very skeletal, we are not empowered to do that much right now because of a lack of funding. And according to Title II, Chapter 7 of the Guam Code Annotated, we are authorized to hire multiple part-time staff to support our mission, which includes an administrative officer, legal secretaries, and even a legal counsel. And when me and Representative Aula Bang met with Senator San Agustin, we did have an initial amount that we did ask for, and we asked for 30,000. And when we met with him, he said, that's a low number. I think we can agree to that. And when I saw the budget come out and I saw 15, I looked at that number and I was like, we can't even pay all of our representatives with 15,000 for the fiscal year. At the current number, we are allowed 51 members. 51 members times 25 times 12 months equals 15,300. That's not even enough for our stipends. Now, we are asking for at least 30,000 for operation costs also, so that we can also do more in the community, do more youth outreach, do more, to rise, to help the Manhoban of Guam, to help the youth of Guam. And we are trying to, strike at least a political climate where our youth can say, we can get involved, we can have a voice, and we can do so much more because the Youth Congress allows us to do so much more. And there are certain processes that we need to fix in the Youth Congress. I know that sometimes when we introduce bills, when we introduce resolutions, they become a little stagnant. And that's something I've been fighting to change. That's something our speaker has been fighting to change. That's something our entire leadership has been fighting to change. And we're getting there slowly. This is the most active Youth Congress I've seen in a very long time. The 32nd has been engaged in civics for a little bit right now. So we are asking the Guam legislature, as we try to get more active, as we try to get more out there and try to get our youth more involved in the political scene, that we can at least have the funding to do some of our projects. Because according to the budget, we are the least funded organization by the budget. The second least funded budget is the Bureau of Women Affairs at $77,000. So if we can offer a small office with one or two people, $77,000, we can offer the youth of Guam with 30 members at least $30,000, $40,000 for operations and stipends. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, senators of the committee. That will be my testimony for today.
All right. Thank you. And I got the signal from the OFB. You need more money. We're basically, for my colleagues, just to let you know, basically the funding is going to come out of the legislature anyway. It's going to come out of the Committee on Rules. So we'll work that with Senator Lee and the Committee on Rules, and as all my colleagues, then maybe we'll figure out a way we'll take care of you. Okay, we'll exceed that what we appropriate, because you're right. If it don't even pay them. I know that the OB will know where to draw it from the Committee on Rules, the funds. Senator Castro, you have any questions?
First, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Kaneni, thank you so much. I usually reserve the opportunity to speak and ask questions, but I want it to be noted for the record, and I want you to know and your colleagues to know that I am thoroughly impressed with your testimony. First of all, it takes a level of confidence to come before this body. Second, you're extremely articulate, and I appreciate you making the case. You remind me of the late Senator, former Speaker of the Guam Youth Congress, Senator Sonny Orsini from Barangada, so I appreciate that. In all seriousness, though, I do have a couple of questions, and forgive me, I was watching you speak, and I wasn't able to take note. So could you restate for the record what the posted or stated budget amount is for the Guam Youth Congress, and then follow up with what your ask is?
Currently, in the budget, we are appropriated $15,000 from Bill 186, and we are requesting at least $30,000. For half of it, it's supposed to be for personnel, and the other half is supposed to be for operations. Whether it be our resolution frames that we haven't been able to do, whether it be even considering hire part-time staff, or conference, or just something as simple as even pins and identification, things that by law we are supposed to have, by our standing rules we are supposed to have, but we do not have the money. And when we request, sometimes it's like, we'll find the money, and I'm like, you can tell me we can find the money, but if it's not stated right there, I know sometimes it's in flux. And there's definitely certain things we want to do logistic and support-wise that I can't give a full list right now, but there are certain things that we would like to do, and at least covering our personnel costs would be priority number one.
Thank you, Mr. Kaneni. Mr. Chairman, I just want to go ahead and state for the record, so as to ensure its germaneness and reserve the opportunity to speak to the possibility of addressing your budget requests. I do want to acknowledge, the hardworking senator who's your oversight chair, and I want to restate the commitment here by the budget chairman to look at your request one more time. But I do want to say, Mr. Chairman, now that I have some of your attention, you're not the only entity looking for additional money. I know that the Commission on Decolonization is looking for additional funds to support their operations, right? And so I'll go back to the executive director and work with Adaloop to determine if, in fact, you both may be willing to share space if additional revenues were identified by the good chairman and his committee. But in that case, should I fall short in advocating for that, I welcome you to come up. We can always make space for you folks, and we certainly will make a commitment to set aside some money for your administrative needs insofar as supplies is required. Thank you so much, Mr. Kaneni, and you are a representative and chairman of the appropriations for the Youth Congress?
Right now, I'm a vice chairman, but our appropriations chairmanship is vacant. I eventually do plan on making a run for our chairmanship for appropriations for Youth Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my questions for him.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Thank you, Mr. Kaneni. There being no one else to testify, like I mentioned to my colleagues and to the people of Guam, we do have some recommended changes. I'll give a very good example. The Guam Highway Fund increase of additional 200-some thousand. The Healthy Future Fund increased about over $2 million. So I will be providing everybody, all my colleagues, a copy with the revised so that you would all understand where the changes are. There were some changes that we are proposing that OFB did sit down with BBMR, and they came to an agreement of what the changes should be. They also had some disagreements of some of the things they wanted, because I don't believe in trying to appropriate every penny we got, because if it don't all come in, we're all going to suffer. So all my colleagues will be receiving this today. It will be delivered to you today, and basically kind of like a clean bill with the changes so that you can match it up with the current bill. There being no one else, the committee will conclude.
Can I just state something for the record?
Sure.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for stating that you're open to receiving testimony. You assured me and members of this body, as well as the listening audience, that we have up to 5 days to submit testimony for inclusion in the committee report. I do want to also state, Mr. Chairman, that I've been working in good faith with this administration and in a bipartisan way to do my part to proffer initiatives that will address a number of those issues you discussed today at the hearing. Controlling GovGuam expenses. Members of the audience also talked about reducing the cumulative deficit. Also, in addition to identifying initiatives that will increase government revenues through the use of technology, Mr. Chairman, as well as other initiatives I'm hoping that we can address on the floor when we debate the merits of these initiatives that have been proffered in the last 2 terms that would help grow the economy. Mr. Chairman, I can acknowledge that when we go into the committee on the whole and in session with the full body, we may not exhaust that list that I'll be referring to and that will be restated in my letter for inclusion in the committee report, Mr. Chairman. But I'm saying this so that I can ensure its germaneness within the context of the fiscal year 2020 proposed budget. It is a fiscal policy document of the Guam legislature, and if adopted, becomes a fiscal policy posture of the territory of Guam. And so I just wanted to ensure that I put that little bookmark and submit my letter for inclusion in the report. Second, and I'll end with this, Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm also privy that Senator Tello Taitagui, who's away on other business off-site, has submitted a July 25th, 2019 email to you, within which she addresses things relative to the charter school, the Guam Memorial Hospital, and the Application Review Committee. Now, while I don't want to go into the details of her email to you and with copy to our colleagues, I just want to state for the public record, again, to ensure its germaneness and reserve her privilege to speak and debate the merits of her ideas as recorded in email and for inclusion in the committee report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Terlai.
Yeah, just one thing. So when BBMR handed us testimonies from some of the agencies, several of these are pointing out what they feel are shortfalls in their budgets. But one in particular I wanted to point out was this Guam Memorial Hospital, and they are mentioning that their top 3 capital improvement projects are not funded. So they remind us of the electrical panel, the electronic health record system, and the repair of the roof. And I know that we've been talking about this, Mr. Chair, but I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Muña.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the OFB staff that's been working really hard and diligently to make sure that this happens, to introduce a sound budget bill. I know your staff has been working really hard, so I really want to acknowledge them and thank them very much for all their hard work and all their tireless hours. And then also, Mr. Chair, you and your staff too as well, willing to listen to each and every one of our respect some of our committees and all of the agencies that we champion to here as well on the panel. And I hope that in the next 5 days that you'll be able to hear some of our pleas, especially from the Guam Cancer Trust Fund. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. There being no one else to testify, the committee will conclude the public hearing for Bill 186-35 COR. Time now is 11:04. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next 5 days. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing and submit it via email, Senator Joe S. @gmail.com. Jesús Marcy for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. Good morning.